don't know what to call this series. Um, so at the start of this year, I wanted to do not every Friday something like a YA review or what have you, but periodically do some YA reading. And it's mainly because I wanted to talk about things from my childhood that I normally wouldn't talk about. Because everyone knows my whole thing, my whole origin with Star Wars, what have you. I've pretty much explained all that. But there were a handful of book series when I was a kid that I was really excited for. For instance, I went to a midnight opening of Deathly Hallows when the novel came out at a Walden Books in the mall. Um, it was a very fascinating experience, especially because I had not read Half Blood Prince yet, and there were all sorts of spoilers and stuff being talked about, and we're like, so yeah, my mother and me went to it. But Harry Potter was always the big YA series. I mean, it's the quintessential one that got the Hollywood treatment. It got 8 very successful movies, although I would argue most of Harry Potter's movie output is pretty bad. Pretty bad. Not in the acting parts. I think the acting's all very fine. It's badly directed. Specifically, I believe the guy David Yost, who started directing with Order of the Phoenix, I think his directing is terrible, and I think his cinematography is some of the worst I have ever seen in a movie. Talk about handheld shaky cam, the movie. Rivaled only by The Hunger Games as just nausea, the film. But you have a lot of the YA series have gotten the Hollywood treatment. Harry Potter's probably the gold standard. You got your Hunger Games, which did really well. Twilight. Those are probably the big three. Although now Twilight's a goofy meme. Although I personally think Hunger Games should also be thrown in there because the acting is just about on par with one another, and they're not good series in my opinion. Um, then you have your lesser stuff like your Divergence, your oh, Aragon. We're getting into when or Maze Runner. Maze Runner's a better option than Aragon because they never made sequels to that awful film. You got your Maze Runner. That's Percy Jackson. I think has gotten a reboot. Um, but like most of those, I didn't read them. I read Harry Potter, like everyone of the tail end of millennials read. Um, it's fine. It's fine. At some point, I will probably end up talking about the novels on here. Um, but at this point in time, that's just not in the cards. That's just an undertaking I don't feel like doing. But the other big book series for me, it wasn't the Spiderwick Chronicles, Golden Compass, um, that sort of thing. It was a series of unfortunate events. This series, I think because I had never read satire before, and these books are young adult satire. They are a farce. They are an absolute farce disguised as like a tragedy. But these books are absolutely goofy, and I love them. I thought they were really funny as a kid, and as an adult going through them, I find them to be very, very goofy and funny as an adult, too. For pretty much the same reasons, I think. The early ones at least hold up. But if you want to start at the chronologically at the beginning, you start with the Dismal Dinner. What on earth is the Dismal Dinner? Well, it's a tie-in to the film that is in continuity with the books. It was one short story broken into 4 teeny parts that you got in Lunchables. You collect all 4 parts. There's a little sentence you have to decode, and it says that Count Olaf was here the whole time. And it's basically the Baudelaire's orphans' parents are having their fourth to last dinner party, and Sunny sees something, and it's mistaken for her teething. So the first part is Violet Baudelaire trying to devise something to help with Sunny's teething. The second part is Klaus in his perspective on the thing. The third is Sunny's, and the fourth is an overall look. This is a fascinating story, not because of its material. There's nothing here that we couldn't glean from after you've read enough of a series of unfortunate events. You figure that Count Olaf and his cronies were after the Baudelaires prior to the the parents dying in a fire. Yeah, it's pretty obvious, especially later on, that there's all sorts of weird stuff with Count Olaf and the secret society and all that. But this one's interesting because it was written near the end of the main series. What I mean by that is the series of unfortunate events. The first book, The Bad Beginning, came out in '99, and The End, book 13, came out in '06. I remember when it came out. I remember being very excited for it, but we'll talk about that when I talk about that book, because I have a bit to say about The End and the series as a whole. But this, it doesn't feel like the early books. It feels like the latter books. In fact, there's references to the accursed sugar bowl, which I won't get into here because that's getting way into the weeds of Lemony Snicket kind of nonsense. Because these books get really convolutedly nonsensical, and the more I get into Lemony Snicket, the more nonsense is there. Like, it's very clear early on that these books were not written to be kind of like Lemony. Okay, here's we'll lay down some ground rules with a series of unfortunate events. Lemony Snicket is a pseudonym for another author, but Lemony Snicket is a character in a series of unfortunate events. To me, I've always, since reading Stephen King's The Dark Tower all the way through, it feels like that Lemony Snicket, especially later on, thought wanted to just make fun of Stephen King himself being a character in The Dark Tower, which is very easy to mock. And when we get to that in King of Our Nightmares, I will mock that because I have big issues with that, with Stephen King being this penultimate prophet. Kind of spoilers too. It doesn't go anywhere in The Dark Tower, but he is a character in the last two books, and it's annoying. But in this, it's like he took that to just an absolute extreme in his books, and it's comical. In the grand scheme of the Lemony Snicket series of unfortunate events add-ons, the Dismal Dinner's on the better end of them. It's not the Beatrice letters, which I think were a literal shitpost on the fans. And it's not as good as the unauthorized autobiography, at least from what I remember of it. But this is something that I remembered it existing, but I never read it. Because I wasn't into Series of Unfortunate Events till the following year, '05. I read the first three books, and I saw the movie, and, I was like, okay. But it wasn't until '05 that I was just like, I have to read all of these. And because it's coming to an end. And so I did. From 5th to 6th grade, I read all of them. And that's what I want to talk about. But you have to talk about the Dismal Dinner first. It's fine. It's fine for what it is. It's a funny gimmick from a time when this, Lunchables and like fruit roll-ups, like companies were trying to get you to buy kids to buy their stuff, right? So they would do things like this. It reminds me of the Star Wars comic Tales of the Pod Racers that was supposed to be in like either fruit snacks or fruit roll-ups, something like that. You can find it in Wild Space Omnibus too. It's a weird gimmicky thing. I liked stuff like that when I was a kid. As an adult, it's very obnoxious when you're trying to review it. Thankfully, if you want to read The Dismal Dinner, you can do so on the Dismal Dinner Wikipedia page. Someone has painstakingly put all the text on there and has explained the the decoding for you, because it's not like they took pictures of the paper that it was printed on. They typed it out, so you're missing some of the fun charm of it. Um, is it worth absolutely necessary to read before getting into a series of unfortunate events? No, and actually, I wouldn't recommend it. I would recommend reading this actually after all of it. And I would say that honestly with all of the additional series of unfortunate events books, like the unauthorized autobiography, though you can get away with reading that after the Hostel Hospital, um, because that's when it was published, was after that. I would recommend reading it at the end, as well as the Beatrice letters, even though those are marketed to not be. You shouldn't bother with those until after, if you're reading it the first time. And this is just a little thing if you wanted more. What would I rank it? It's a 2.5 out of 5. It's not very good. It's written in the style of all the other series of unfortunate event stuff, so that makes it worthwhile, but that's really it. So, anyway, I'm going to be going through this whole series, so please bear with me. Anyway, have a nice day.